Right now, 16 lethal 29-meter-long Iranian Ghadir-class submarines are sitting in total, terrifying silence on the dark, shallow floor of the Persian Gulf, completely undetectable by American sonar. Directly above them, dozens of colossal multi-million-dollar oil tankers are frantically churning water, executing desperate emergency U-turns to flee the Strait of Hormuz. Why? Because an Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander just hijacked international maritime radio frequencies to officially declare the world's most critical waterway closed, openly mocking the President of the United States as some idiot. This unprecedented geopolitical humiliation comes mere hours after Donald Trump took a grandiose victory lap on social media, falsely boasting to the entire globe that the vital strait was completely reopened and secured. The grand illusion of American dominance has shattered into a million pieces. Meanwhile, at exactly 3:42 in the morning Washington time, the unthinkable happened. The legendary Israel Defense Forces transmitted a desperate request for an immediate cessation of hostilities, effectively surrendering under the sheer arithmetic of a synchronized catastrophic saturation strike that overwhelmed their entire nation. Welcome to the spectacular, real-time collapse of United States deterrence, where empty White House tweets are brutally crushed by the cold, unforgiving reality of asymmetric military supremacy. To truly comprehend the sheer, staggering magnitude of this geopolitical whiplash, we must forensically dissect the catastrophic sequence of events that just unfolded across the Middle East. The instrument that forced Israel to its knees was not a single dramatic surprise weapon. It was the unyielding, overwhelming mathematics of 450 Shahab-3 ballistic missiles launched from Iranian territory in intricately synchronized salvos. Simultaneously, Hezbollah forces unleashed an apocalyptic barrage of 2,500 rockets and precision munitions from Lebanese soil along the entire northern frontier. This operation began its final activation sequence 72 hours before the very first missile left its launch tube, representing years of meticulous planning by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah leadership. Iran did not fire its arsenal sequentially. They fired in devastating, coordinated salvos of 15 to 20 missiles targeted against specific Israeli military installations. These missiles, equipped with separating re-entry vehicles that detach in the terminal phase of flight, arrived from multiple vectors within agonizingly compressed 90-second windows. This brilliantly designed mathematical assault deliberately overwhelmed the intercept assignment capacity of absolutely every defense battery in the coverage zone. An Arrow 3 battery can only engage a strictly limited number of targets, and Iran calculated the exact leakage rate for every single system to guarantee destruction. The staggering Hezbollah barrage was composed specifically to financially and operationally bleed the Iron Dome. Short-range Katyusha rockets, costing a mere $300 to produce, served strictly as interceptor consumers against Israeli Tamir interceptors that cost $50,000 each. While the Iron Dome was completely saturated, precision-guided Fateh 110 missiles were explicitly reserved to target the Israeli defense battery positions themselves. Furthermore, Iran deployed vicious cluster munition warheads, which comprised approximately 50% of their ballistic missile deployments targeting airfield surfaces. As the former director of Israel's Ballistic Missile Defense Organization formally explained, after the cluster is opened, one missile suddenly becomes 80 separate descending targets spread across a massive 10-kilometer dispersal radius. Electronic warfare warheads were simultaneously detonated to blind Israeli radar installations with electromagnetic pulses. By the time the Israel Defense Forces transmitted their ceasefire request under extreme duress, Arrow 3 batteries had exhausted approximately 70% of their interceptor inventory, and the military had concluded that continued organized resistance was simply no longer operationally viable. But the total humiliation of American and Israeli military might does not stop in the flaming skies over Tel Aviv. The true strategic nightmare extends deep into the dark waters of the Persian Gulf. The geography of the Strait of Hormuz inherently makes the American Navy's most sophisticated capabilities functionally irrelevant. The navigable shipping channels are only 3 kilometers wide, and the average water depth is a mere 30 meters. You absolutely cannot fit an American Ohio-class submarine, which is 170 meters long and displaces 18,000 tons of water, into a channel that is just 30 meters deep. Trying to deploy America's most powerful undersea platforms into this specific theater is the precise operational equivalent of trying to thread a massive rhinoceros through the eye of a needle. Iran's Ghadir submarines are specifically designed for these exact shallow waters. When a Ghadir submarine settles onto the seabed and completely shuts down its engines, it becomes acoustically indistinguishable from the heavy background noise of the busy commercial waterway functioning directly above it. These tiny submarines carry highly intelligent naval mines, specifically the Maham 3 and Maham 7 variants, which can be explicitly programmed to distinguish between military warships and commercial tankers. The Pentagon has already desperately confirmed that at least a dozen deadly mines have been deployed in the strait, successfully holding the entire global economy hostage. Washington arrogantly announced Operation Mysterious Fury, publicly claiming American forces had successfully destroyed 11 Iranian submarines. But America's European allies privately mock this operation, derisively calling it Mysterious Flight because they withdrew their own military involvement so rapidly. The stark reality is profoundly embarrassing. American forces managed to destroy a few larger, noisier, Russian-made Kilo-class submarines and the Fateh-class, but they could not find a single one of the shallow-water Ghadir submarines that pose the actual existential threat. Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Spain have all outright declined to participate in any naval operation aimed at forcefully reopening the strait. The German defense minister publicly and bluntly stated that Europe will not send its frigates into the strait to do what the immensely powerful American Navy apparently cannot do for itself. Donald Trump furiously responded by calling his European allies cowards, but this volatile outburst changed absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Theodore Roosevelt carrier strike groups are completely paralyzed, deliberately operating at standoff distances because American Naval Command has explicitly assessed that the risk of Iranian anti-ship missiles is simply unacceptable. With the kinetic military option completely neutralized, Donald Trump has resorted to an absolutely delusional campaign of diplomatic fabrications. Just this morning, Trump posted wildly on social media that the Strait of Hormuz was completely open and ready for business. He arrogantly claimed that Iran had agreed to never close the strait again and that it was a brilliant day for the world. However, the reality on the water is a scene of unprecedented, panicked maritime chaos. Nearly 3 dozen massive commercial vessels, including Chinese, Indian, and French ships, made a desperate break for the strait because they foolishly believed the American president. The moment they reached the Iranian threshold, they were forced to execute abrupt, desperate U-turns back into the Persian Gulf. Iran officially broadcasted a very high-frequency message on International Channel 16, explicitly stating that the strait is still closed. They humiliated Washington by declaring, "We will open it by the order of our leader Imam Khamenei, not by the tweets of some idiot." Iran laid down the absolute law of the sea. Any ship wishing to pass must first obtain explicit, direct permission from the heavily sanctioned Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Furthermore, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that passage is strictly limited to a coordinated route completely controlled by Iranian ports and maritime organizations. Iran is explicitly demanding maritime tolls for security provisions, effectively transferring the Strait of Hormuz directly into Iran's sovereign territorial waters forever. Donald Trump is so thoroughly confused and defeated that he accidentally posted on social media referring to the waterway as the Strait of Iran, prompting immediate, ruthless mockery from Iranian social media accounts. To mask this profound capitulation, Axios is reporting that the United States is actually contemplating giving Iran $20 billion in cash. In exchange for this astronomical sum, Iran is supposedly agreeing to voluntarily stop enriching uranium to weapons grade. This pathetic, toothless deal completely abandons the strict multilateral agreements of the past in favor of a hollow system where Iran simply makes voluntary disclosures. As geopolitical analyst Danny Citrinowicz accurately noted, Iran came out of this conflict with the absolute upper hand, demonstrating its total ability to threaten and effectively control the Strait of Hormuz while completely refusing to yield to United States demands. The global economic fallout is utterly apocalyptic. Brent crude oil has soared past $110 per barrel, with prices reaching up to $118. The International Energy Agency was desperately forced to release a record 400 million barrels of emergency crude reserves just to momentarily slow the bleeding, while American motorists are suffering gas prices of over $7 a gallon. As the legendary geopolitical analyst Professor John Mearsheimer brilliantly details, Iran is definitively winning this war, and Donald Trump is deeply trapped in an inescapable lose-lose situation. If Trump stubbornly continues the war, he absolutely cannot win it, and he runs the massive risk that the international economy will trigger a catastrophic worldwide depression. If he quits the war and makes these unprecedented major concessions to the Iranians, he does enormous permanent damage to his political career. Israel is also suffering a massive, unprecedented defeat. According to the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Israel has basically run out of missile interceptors, allowing a staggering 8 out of every 10 Iranian ballistic missiles to get through and brutally strike their targets. Furthermore, Israel is fundamentally failing in its prolonged ground war in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has entirely rebuilt its massive arsenal and is highly effectively utilizing sophisticated drones equipped with fiber optics to destroy huge numbers of Israeli tanks on the battlefield. The horrifying civilian toll of the American and Israeli bombing campaign exposes the sheer desperation of their failing strategy. Under the direct threat of a Donald Trump ultimatum demanding the destruction of civilian infrastructure, American and Israeli forces committed blatant war crimes. Confirmed reports document that they deliberately struck at least 30 Iranian universities, including the prestigious Sharif University of Technology. They viciously bombed hospitals, civilian roads, bridges, and dense residential areas. This horrific terror campaign forced an estimated 9 million people to desperately flee Tehran and other major cities. Yet despite enduring strikes from roughly 200 fighter jets flying nearly 25,000 sorties and dropping bunker-buster bombs on the crown jewels of Iran's nuclear program, the Iranian regime survived completely intact. In the Middle East, surviving the full unrestrained fury of the American military machine is considered a monumental, historic victory. Iran entered this conflict with a damaged nuclear program, and it brilliantly exits the conflict with vastly less international oversight, officially ending all cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. While America bleeds out in the Middle East, the strategic vacuum has created a terrifying, apocalyptic scenario in Europe. Former UN weapons inspector and U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer Scott Ritter has just delivered a chilling assessment. Russia is actively preparing a decisive, devastating strike against NATO countries. European leaders are currently speaking quite loudly and proudly about all the strategic drones they are continuously sending to Ukraine to carry out strikes deep into the absolute depth of the Russian Federation. These attacks are originating directly from the Baltic states and Finland. In direct response, the Russian Defense Ministry has officially published a hit list of European facilities producing these weapons. Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu has explicitly stated that Russia possesses the fundamental right to self-defense against these European territories. Scott Ritter warns that the era of Russian strategic patience has officially ended. What Europe is currently doing is a direct, undeniable act of war, and they are active, belligerent participants in the conflict. If Russia decides to strike, they operate under the philosophy, if you are going to strike the king, you must kill the king. This will be a devastating shot that completely obliterates the potential of Europe to carry out their proxy war, and when the Russian missiles rain down, the United States will absolutely not trigger NATO's Article 5. Because these drone attacks were individual sovereign decisions made by nations like Germany and the UK, acting completely outside the NATO framework, Donald Trump will simply abandon them. Trump has already explicitly told NATO allies that they were useless when America needed them. He will look at a burning Europe and say, "You brought it upon yourself," signaling the absolute accelerated death of the NATO alliance. Europe is currently committing utter economic and military suicide. They have zero defense industry, zero functioning army, and zero air force without the backing of the United States. The International Energy Agency has just issued a devastating warning that Europe literally runs out of aviation gas in just 6 weeks, right in the middle of the summer travel season. This shortage will instantly cascade into a diesel fuel crisis, completely grounding transport trucks and triggering the absolute end of the functioning European economy. While European politicians engage in pure delusion by passing phantom €90 billion aid packages to an inherently corrupt Ukrainian government, the Russian military is meticulously setting up a massive summer offensive. By painstakingly cutting lines of communication and luring Ukrainian forces into ridiculous counterattacks that have completely eliminated their reserves, Russia is preparing to punch straight through Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. If that urban belt falls, the entirety of the Donbas falls, and Russia will simply violently take the territory. The ultimate undisputed victors of this spectacular American collapse are Russia and China. Because the global economy is desperate for oil, the United States was humiliatingly forced to lift economic sanctions on both Iranian and Russian oil. To desperately plug the bleeding wounds in the Middle East, the United States is forcefully pivoting away from Asia, stripping critically important military forces from places like South Korea and Japan. This chaotic abandonment severely damages American relations with its Asian allies, while completely failing to contain China. Meanwhile, the Chinese government is aggressively defying American blockades, buying massive quantities of Iranian oil, and brutally lecturing U.S. allies. When the UAE attempted to warn China about supporting Iran, the Chinese Foreign Ministry explicitly told them, "You don't get to tell the dragon what to do with its foreign relations." Driven entirely by his desperate need to solve his own domestic political crisis ahead of the crucial November midterm elections, Donald Trump has effectively given Vladimir Putin a total, unmitigated blank check in Ukraine, telling the Russians that America is not interfering and to do whatever they need to do to get it wrapped up. The grand illusion of perpetual Western dominance is currently burning to the ground on multiple continents simultaneously. The Strait of Hormuz is completely controlled by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. European economies are weeks away from total catastrophic paralysis, and the invincible American military has been neutralized by cheap drones and shallow water submarines. The President of the United States is desperately tweeting fabricated victories while multi-trillion-dollar shipping fleets execute panicked U-turns in the dark waters of the Persian Gulf. The NATO alliance is fracturing, Israel has suffered a historic military defeat, and the geopolitical axis of Russia and China is rapidly dictating the new world order. We are no longer transitioning into a multipolar world. We have violently crashed into it, and the American empire is bleeding out on the geopolitical chessboard. Do not listen to the sanitized political theater. Watch the brutal, unforgiving movements of the global military landscape. Stay highly vigilant, stay fully informed, and thoroughly prepare for the immense economic and geopolitical shockwaves that are actively tearing our world apart.